Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here. I had a PowerPoint presentation, but His Excellency, Mr. Mohammed Aran, just used my slides about YouTube and about Facebook and about cloud computing. So what I thought I would do is, if you will indulge me, it's early in the morning, we all have had breakfast. I'm going to turn this around, and we're going to start by asking you to ask questions on what you would like to learn about Google and what you would like to hear about specifically. And then I will put the presentation together with your help. It's called user-generated content, okay, or audience-generated content. So do you guys have any questions you would like to talk about, or any things you want to talk about as it relates to the digital ecosystem, its impact on the region, or things we just heard His Excellency talk about in terms of the future of IPTV, cloud computing, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, sir.
If you think of Google as a kind of gateway to the internet universe, do you think that there is place for some specific regional gateways? Because more and more these are places where people are spending time of their day-to-day life. So do you think that the specificity of a culture of a region can have its place in going this route via Google or via the internet space?
Okay, so I'm going to keep collecting questions because we have to put this presentation together. So one is around the regional capabilities or possibilities around the internet. Yes, ma'am. We're gonna have a mic, so I don't have to repeat your question.
So Google is the search engine is for discovery of content on the internet, but more and more people are discovering content through social networks like Facebook and Twitter. How does Google perceive the challenge of Facebook and Twitter, and what's Google doing? Because there is certain level you can use algorithms, but then there becomes a point where you want to use human interaction on top, which is what social networks are providing. So how is Google preparing?
So the role of social networking and its impact on Google, is that a fair paraphrasing of your question? Yes, sir. We got two more people. Oh, sorry, please. Yes, sir.
Thank you. How do you see Google positioned in the future in terms of comparison with conventional broadcasters? And do you think Google is going to be a broadcaster, a telecom operator, one-stop shop for everything?
Okay, we only have 19 minutes and its time is declining, but I'll try and answer your question. So, okay, I understood the question. There were two more gentlemen in the back who had some questions. And there's one here as well, and here, and here, and there.
It costs a lot of money to host 35, well, however many hours of videos every few seconds. How are you going to make the money back?
Okay. Right, that's an easy question.
Yeah, related question. What's your strategic and commercial vision for YouTube?
Okay. Yes, sir. All right. Anybody who has a mic? There's one here, one there, and a few on this side. Yes, sir.
His Excellency Hamad Amran spoke about cloud computing and data center. I think Google was leading and still leading in the cloud computing arena. What about considering regional data center in the area to support Google expansion?
I hope you don't work for a data center business. I'll try and answer your question. Yes, sir. I'm not sure it's a trick question. If he wants to know, are we going to compete, or does he want us to? Yes.
As you continue to aggregate more global content, how will you be able to continue to comply with all of the regional laws? As you continue to operate in more regions and more cultures.
Okay. Yes, sir.
How do you see the future of telcos and media companies? What is Google vision of the future of those two sectors?
Got it. So it's related to the gentleman's question earlier about our role perhaps in the broadcasting telecom space. Yes, sir.
The future of Google in China. when you talk about Google and developing
I
countries.
can't talk about the future of China. I can try and answer
The future
our
of Google
role
in
in
China.
China. Yes.
Or Google with China.
Yes, sir.
Arabic content on the internet only comprises about 1%. And we saw in Monaco, Carlo was kind enough to show us a beta prototype of the Google translation service, but the voice translation, not the Google Translate. We all understand the potential of how these translation services can impact connecting people to the world for content, but practically and realistically, how do you see that evolving? How do you see it being used, and what kind of time frame do you see that occurring in?
Okay. We'll take the last few ones, and then I'll try and tell you a story, and then we'll come back and ask some more questions if I have any time left. Yes, sir.
How big do you want to be, and where do you draw the line as far as Google?
Oh, good. Got it. This gentleman there, and then I'll try and answer the question.
I was wondering if you might talk about the platforms to be deployed by Google on connected and wired TVs and the ability of consumers to program their own channels on those platforms.
Okay, good. I'll take the last two, and then I'll tell you a story, then I'll come back and answer questions. Otherwise, we can do it offline. The lady here and the gentleman over there, please.
Do you plan to be more acquisitive in the social media space?
Okay, so that's a question somebody already asked, but I will
sorry.
try not. No, don't worry about it. Gentleman in the corner, please.
Hi. When you Google MP3 music, of the top 20 search replies, 17 will be illegal file sharing sites. Just wonder where you think Google's going to take that trend.
Okay, all right. Thank you for asking all the easy questions. I now think I should have just settled for a set of PowerPoint slides and just given the presentation and left, right? I'll try and draw from the previous presentation, and I'll try and put some of the questions that you guys have asked me. I think it's fair to say that everybody sitting in this room, that if you saw the first presentation, I saw 7.2 billion devices around the world, or connectivity of 7.2 billion. It's interesting, there are 6 billion people in the world. When I used to stand up on stages, and many of you guys who worked in the telecom industry used to stand up, a few years ago, 1 billion was a big number. You'd say 1 billion SIM cards is a lot of SIM cards, and we can have 1 billion connected devices, and we would all be happy. Now, very simply, we talk about 7.2 billion connected devices, and that's because you're still thinking SIM cards. If you start thinking about the number of Wi-Fi devices that exist in the world, I think we're going to be hitting about 15 billion devices in the next 5 to 8 years, which will be connected to the web or the internet. Now, 15 billion is a big number, because we've suddenly decided we don't want to carry SIM cards, we don't want to carry connectivity, our device will just connect to the cloud. If you believe that hypothesis, if you believe that that's going to happen, just imagine that you wouldn't know what to do with an unconnected device. I was asking my daughter the other day, saying, you know, if I turn off the Wi-Fi in the house, what are you going to do with your computer? She says, I don't know. Now, you guys remember, there was a time we used to use computers without the internet. But now, even I don't turn on my computer if I go to a hotel and find out the connectivity doesn't exist. I just shut it down, don't you? So we are now used to a connected device around us. And the one big device, the one big area which will relate to the questions that were asked earlier, the next device that we're going to see this happen is going to be the television. Like, you're beginning to see televisions which are slowly getting connected to the web, whether it's with an Apple TV or Google TV. I just finished building a house, and in there, my Blu-ray player connects to the internet, my television connects to the internet, everything that sort of forms part of the television value chain connects to the internet. Even my cable broadcaster allows me to go connect to the internet from the back. So it's interesting. You're beginning to see connectivity come to the last bastion of unconnected devices, which are the largest segment of devices in the world, which is televisions. Right? So if you believe now in this future where we're going to have everything connected to the web, you know, I'm just trying to relate to the notion of what happens to the telecom companies, what happens to the broadcasters. I think this is good news. This is like PCs. You know, every time we create more bandwidth, we find applications that fill up the bandwidth. If you sat and talked about, oh my God, what am I going to do with 128 kbps GPRS? I don't know. I only need whatever 9.2 to do SMS, that's 10 times too many. Suddenly, if I told you you have 128 kbps connectivity, you're going to wonder, what does that mean? And does that mean I can watch a video or not? And you cannot. You can try, but you cannot. Right? Now we're talking about 1 gigabyte speeds on the fixed line. And over time, you'll find applications will be created which will start consuming that amount of bandwidth. So the good news for the telecom industry is the more bandwidth we create, the more the consumers will find applications to start using those bandwidths. Now, as it relates to how does that notion interplay with the notion of connected televisions and broadcasting, I think definitely consumers of our generation or the next generation are not going to accept a pre-programmed notion of being told what they should see at what point in time. And you can already see that happen. People start to watch their own digital downloads, they start watching their own videos, they start watching their own TV shows, they start watching their own movies, whether they download them through iTunes or they download them from elsewhere. So I think in that context, we are seeing the early signs of a notion where I will design what I want to watch by myself. If you take that as an extreme statement compared to what we see today as a pre-designed broadcasting schedule to an extreme where I will decide what I want to watch when I want to watch, there's going to be a lot of transitions between this point and this point. Right? Today we get that all figured out for us. Tomorrow this is what we're going to have to do. Now, when I want to do this, today I will pull from different places. I will pull from YouTube, I will pull from Netflix, I will pull from iTunes, I will pull from various content my broadcaster offers. And I'm going to start trying to create my own package. Over time, you will notice that content will become more and more available in digital ways and digital means and be available for IPTV-like consumption, right? And then you will find notions where I will be able to program my own schedule, or perhaps there'll be some, for some lazy people like me, there'll be some intelligent ways of creating algorithms which will see what I like to watch and start giving me recommendations of things that I might want to watch. So I think we are going to go towards a future where you will be able to personalize and customize the kind of content that people would like to watch when they want to watch it, where they want to watch it. So that's sort of my quick summary of what we think is going to happen in the broadcasting space, in the content space. And then I will touch upon the Google aspirations in a quick second. Let me change gears very quickly and talk about the trends you're seeing on the web. What's very interesting is we have this phenomenal ability to overestimate the short term and underestimate the long term. Right, so if I told you, let's get this done, you'll say, I'll definitely get it done by the end of the year. And the end of the year arises and say, oh my God, I'm only halfway through. And if I tell you, do you think this will happen in the next 10 years? Like, that's tough. It's not going to happen in 10 years, and it happens. And it's very interesting. If you go back in our lifetimes, if you think about digital cameras, there was a time when we all used to have those cameras with those reels that went in the back. Do you guys remember those? They're gone. You remember those televisions which used to have those hunchbacks? They're gone, right? They're not selling them anymore. You remember PCs with no broadband connectivity? They're gone. They're not selling them anymore. So we have this tendency to not to try and sit and say, oh my God, this trend cannot take over because it's going to make things sort of go away. So similarly, those connected TVs are going to show up and you will not be able to buy a TV which is not connected to the web. Now, in terms of trends, when we started the search business, I was happy when I did a search if I could find something on the first page or the second page or the third page of the web, right? If you did a Google search or any kind of search, you were happy. Today, I get very unhappy when I type the name of a restaurant on my phone and I don't get the address of the restaurant and I don't get the phone number. That irritates me, right? You say, oh my God, what is wrong with this web? What is wrong with this Google Maps or this Google search? Why can't I find the answer? Similarly, when you do that on the web, the same thing happens. Today, if you want to hear what happened in Japan 5 minutes ago and you do a Google search and you don't get the answer in terms of what is happening right now, real time, you sit there and say, what is going on? People are not putting this information fast enough. So 10 years ago, we were sort of circling the web or using our spiders every 24 hours, every hour. Now it's every few minutes. That requires us humongous amounts of computing power. That requires humongous amounts of algorithms to pull this together. And to your point earlier, even though you're getting a lot of information from the Twitters and the Facebooks of the world, all that information that needs to get collated and be produced real time when people search for that information. And I think it's unfair to believe that there will be one company which is going to solve the entire internet problems of the future, or there will be one player. Just the internet actually is a reflection of businesses today. Right? Today we have hundreds of companies which satisfy our needs for commerce, information. The post office allows us to send letters and mail. So a lot of these things are now being replicated on the web in a more efficient way because the web is one large information, communication, and distribution network. So there will be many different players who will play in that space, not just Google. So Twitter has its place, Facebook has its place. Clearly the trend is that people, because there's so much information, right? 280 exabytes of information created in 2009, which is, I think, 40 times more information or 50 times more information than was created in the entire history of mankind. Was created last year, that much. So when you have 50 times that information, you have to find an efficient way of being able to parse through it and being able to sort of decide what makes sense to you. So yes, there is a notion that I might be using my social network or my friends who will tell me what is a nice restaurant to eat, because if I try looking on the web, there is so much more information, I might rely on my friends. Sure, so there will be a notion where social recommendation will take its place. At the same time, I'm not going to rely on my friends to tell me who's the best surgeon so I can get myself fixed, right? My friend says, oh, I've got this really cool doctor, I really like him, you should use him. Thank you very much. I'm not going to let somebody operate on my heart just because you think he's a good doctor. So there will be different notions where you will have certain amounts of information, you will rely on your friends, certain amount of information, you will still want experts and specialists, and there will be different roles that different people will have. In that context, what do we want to do? What does Google want to do? Look, we're a company which tries to solve problems of technological scale. Whenever we feel there's a large problem which technology can solve, we start getting excited, people really get happy at Google, they sort of jump up to work and say, I'm going to solve this. And when that happens, say, well, how are we going to take the entire world's information and find a way to make sense out of it and be able to put it back to people when they're searching for it? And whilst it seems trivial, it is an extremely complicated computer science problem. To be able to go out and have servers in every country, in every part of the world, be able to give you information in sub 0.016 seconds so that when you type a search, we can give you the answer. And now if some of you have experienced it, we have a product called Instant Search where as you're typing, it is trying to predict what you're looking for and show you various results. So you don't even have to finish typing. We're hoping one day you won't have to touch the keyboard and it'll just start showing you what you want. We're still working on those things which are going to figure that out for us. But so you can see it takes tremendous amounts of technology to make that happen. It takes tremendous amounts of technology to make the world's maps and the world's pictures of people's homes available, if they allow us to put them up there. I have to say that. So we see large technological problems. We see where there is technological inefficiency or where we can drive a trend, where we try and find ways to solve that problem. Whether it's trying to create a new mobile software system called Android, or whether it's trying to create a new browser called Chrome, the motivation that we come from is always, let's see an interesting technological problem and we can try and solve it. Of course, we always do it in the context of the fact that we want to help organize the world's information, or we want to create platforms that make technology, computing more efficient. We don't have any aspiration to be a telecom company or a broadcaster. We have aspirations to make sure people can find the information they're looking for when they're looking for it. In terms of the question of how do we intend to make money out of this, for the most part, content on the web, or content in general, has made money by purely advertising or by people paying for the content. There are free newspapers you can find in the London Tube. If you sit, people read the newspaper, they leave it back, the next person reads it. And the way the entire newspaper is funded is through advertising. Or you can buy a magazine called the Harvard Business Review, or you can buy a medical journal, which costs $1,000, and it has no ads in it. Same thing happens on television. You can watch a movie with no ads, you pay for it. You can watch a movie which takes 4 hours to watch a 1.5-hour movie because there are lots of ads in it. Right? So similarly, the web has the same issue. You can get content which is going to be funded by advertising. You will get content which people have to pay for, and you will find models in the middle. The big challenge, though, is what has happened is the cost structure is changing, right? In the past, we had large costs of production, large costs of distribution, which are going down. The web gives you a cheaper way of distributing. However, it provides lesser amount of revenue for the same number of users, and that's a problem that a lot of content owners are grappling with, and they will solve it because new models will be created. Some people will have more volume of readers. Some people will have a new model of creating content and distributing content. So did I answer many of your questions? What I have not touched upon is the regional notion and the impact of the Arabic language and the translation issue. On the translation issue, I think it is important to understand that let me tell you a story. So earlier, when people did translation, it was like a dictionary. You had a word, you went to a dictionary, you found the corresponding answer, and you tried to translate a sentence. Which, if many of you have tried, it's very hard because you end up with a very strange sentence. Try reading a German dictionary and trying to speak to somebody who asks you a question in German, trying to give him an answer. After coming up with an English answer, you will find out you seem like an idiot, because I have tried it and it's pretty stupid. If you speak German, you have all the tenses wrong, you have the words juxtaposed in the wrong direction, right? So that's not a good way to translate. You don't take a word for word translation. So what one of our engineers decided is, the best way to translate is to take something that is already translated and see if that's the right answer. So we have 20 million books scanned in a particular language. If you see the same sentence in 7 different books translated the same way, there is a very high probability that's what that sentence means. So you actually look at sentence translations which are done, and you compare that to sentence translations, and because you have so much computing power now, it's sort of almost free to translate it from a computing power perspective, so your translation gets better. Now, voice recognition is getting better as well. So if you combine voice recognition with your ability to translate very quickly on the internet, you have an interesting solution. And the interesting solution is I can speak into my phone recognizes what I said, translates that into text, sends the text into the cloud figures out what the right translation is, sends that new text back, and reconverts that into voice, and I can hear it back. And all that happens under a few seconds. And that's the power of translation on the web. Now, the reason I think it has phenomenal value in every other culture around the world is because a majority of the content on the web is in English. That's not, proportionately, it's not the accurate representation of cultures around the world. But if you can apply translation to all the content that is on the web, we will be able to unearth tremendous amounts of information. I'd much rather see what the Japanese journalists are writing about what's happening in Japan, as opposed to what the English journalists sitting in Washington, D.C. or New York are writing about what's happening in Japan, because I might get a different picture. But for that to happen in a seamless fashion without me having to learn my Japanese overnight, it's probably easier if you can do that using some form of technology around translate. So I think the whole ability to translate is going to have a significant impact on humanity, on cultures, and how we process information. I know it's not there yet, and I don't think it's going to be there by the end of this year. I'm pretty sure it'll be solved way before 10 years. And I think that's going to be a big, interesting trend that's really what we're going to see. I'm now in overtime. So am I allowed more questions now? I don't know what that means. How big do I want to be? Yes. Look, we don't wake up in the morning at Google standing up there and saying, we want to be so big. We say, here's a problem we want to solve, and we're trying to find a way to create an amazing product for the end consumer. If the end customer likes that product, they love it, we get a lot of users, great. If we don't, we're not going to succeed. What we like to say in our search business is we are one click away from competition. If you don't like the answers we give you, you can go somewhere else and search for the same answers. So from that perspective, we try and make sure we design our products in a way that if you decided you didn't like the Google product, you could leave tomorrow morning with your information and go use any other product in the world. And there's a very conscious philosophy at Google around that. It's something we call the Data Liberation Project, where we actually make sure your data can be liberated from us and you can take it with you wherever you want to go. And beyond that, we judge our success as a company based on the success of our products, based on the user's desires. So if users don't like our products, we're not going to be successful. So we'll be as big as the users want us to be. We'll have a dialogue afterwards. I'm on stage right now, so we can do that. I need to ask the people who manage my destiny here. Can I answer more questions? Yes, sir. There's a mic right behind you.
There's an ongoing debate about net neutrality. And how do you see that playing out? And do you think there's a threat that the ISPs or the gatekeepers of the bandwidth are going to become the ones who decide what succeeds and what doesn't in the pricing of products on the internet?
That's a longer conversation, but I think there is a symbiotic relationship. As I said earlier, if you don't have bandwidth, you can't provide services. But if you don't have services and you have a lot of bandwidth, they're not going to get paid for. So there is a symbiotic relationship between bandwidth and applications. And I think if the bandwidth providers charge the right price to the consumer for their bandwidth, and the services, if they have a price, will charge the right price for their services. But I don't think you can selectively choose which service should be priced how. It's almost like saying, if I mail my family will, the postage stamp should be different on the mail, as opposed to if I mail an old love letter. I don't know how you price a love letter versus a family will, because one has more monetary value than the other, but you can't price traffic differently depending on what the traffic is about. That's my view, but that debate will continue. Yes, sir.
You were just talking about translation and the fact that the translation software depends on the availability of digitized information in that language. You did an initiative in the English language and I guess other languages where you began this work of digitizing books. Do you have any initiative already started, or do you plan to do so for the Arabic language?
We have digitized tens of millions of books around the world, and some of them, and they're in many different languages. They're not just in English language. And I think we're not going to be the only providers of content in the world. As you can see, content is created around the world in different languages, and digitization happens around the world in different languages. There are some Arabic scripts and books in the libraries that we are working in and have worked with to digitize, but we're happy to entertain any ideas. The challenge is not the digitization problem. The challenge is getting the permissions from the various governments and the authorities to allow us to digitize the books. I mean, the problem is there are 70 years worth of books which cannot be digitized because of copyright laws. So you can do anything before 70 years in most countries in the world, and you can do anything that's current. There's a gap in the middle of about 70 years where you just can't do it because of legal reasons. Yes, sir.
About a year and a half ago, you had a bit of a flap with China.
Oh, yes, the gentleman asked me about China, yes.
And I wonder if you could tell us what the company has learned from that experience.
Look, I think the China story for us was very straightforward. We decided about six and a half years ago that we wanted to be present in China and provide our services to the users, which we always did, except we decided to locate our servers in China because you could get lower latency and a faster access to information, which we did. And we thought as the internet evolves, as information evolves, the notion people will get more comfortable with the citizens having access to information. What we realized while operating there for 5 years that things did not change as much in terms of the way the information was allowed to the end user, and we decided we did not want to participate in that process. So we decided to relocate our servers back to Hong Kong, and we moved our services from not being provided in China to being provided from Hong Kong, which has been acceptable to the government thereafter. But we're not providing service from within China. As a consequence, we had to move some of our employees, et cetera. That's where we stand. Our view is information is like water. It finds its own level wherever you go. And over time, people have to get comfortable with the fact that more information will be available to people in the world. I mean, let's be fair. Information has been the biggest empowering source in the world other than anything else. People have got power from information over time. The more you educate people, the more they learn, the more they're able to use the information. Again, it's important that people who have the information apply judgment in using the information. It's never the issue about the teacher is never at fault. It's the student who has to absorb it and decide how he wants to use the information. You can use the information mostly in very good ways, and once in a while you use information in bad ways. At some point in time, somebody will come and drag me off stage, I promise. Somebody's got a mic. Just give it to anybody. You guys want me to come back? Is that it? He's showing me his watch. So I'll take the last 2 questions, then I'll go.
Actually,
yes,
I have 2 questions. So
no, you get one.
But it's the
only
same
fair.
thing. What is your take on location-based services for the future, and also with perspective into the social buying Google offers? What are you going to do with those?
That's a highly informed question. In terms of location-based, look, most devices are able to tell you where they're located, and as more and more information begins to happen in the world, location becomes an interesting parameter to try and give you better information. And so if you search for a restaurant while you're standing here, most likely you want one within the vicinity as opposed to one in Washington, D.C. or in New York or in San Francisco or in London. So location is an interesting qualifier to give you a smaller corpus of information. So I think a lot of information sources use location to give you better information. And that's going to continue. In terms of social buying, I mean, you're calling it social buying, it's online coupons, right? Is that what you're talking about? I used to get a coupon in the mail in my house for pizza, buy 2 pizzas, get 1 free. Now I get it on the internet, it's an email, and if I buy it, I get 1 free. So you're seeing that offline behavior is being reflected in a more efficient fashion online. which over time I think will evolve again with the combination of the Facebooks and the Googles and the idea of having coupons and e-commerce. They will all converge into a next application layer. Let me digress for one quick second. One of the things which is very interesting is every time you go to a conference, you talk about the current trend, right? You don't think about the next trend that these trends enable. So, for example, Google search would not have been possible if we did not have an internet that was connected around the world and you can search around the world. The moment you connected the web around the world, all the information was available so you could search around the web. Now that you can search around the web, things can be found, people created lots of businesses which wanted to be found. Then suddenly when everybody in the world, 60, 100 million, 600 million, a billion people were connected, we created something called Facebook. So what is happening is these trends enable more and more trends, and that's what you're going to see. So the question is, what next trend is enabled? I'm being told to stop. So with that, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate your time. Have a good conference.